Well, hello, friends and fellow pioneers. Today, I have the pleasure of having with us Mark Vorderbruggen, also known as Merriwether, but he is the author of this book that we carry actually in our, well, this book that we own and the other one that's coming that we carry in our van all the time. This was actually Jason's like favorite book other than the Bible. We carry everywhere we
Ooh.
go. And so it's such an honor to have you, Mark,
Uh,
here with us today. I'm going to let you tell us of all the amazing things that have you've gone through to get here. But today we're going to talk about foraging. It's such an important topic to talk about
yeah.
for resilience, for survival in today's the season of the world that we're in today, and safety in it, and the health in it, and the benefits and the things that people need to know. And so I will let you share with us your background of how did you end up being so well known in this topic of foraging for edible wild plants and medicinal herbs.
It's a weird story, and I kind of through doing other things ended up where I am today. But going back to the whole foraging thing, my earliest memories were being out with my mom, my dad, and grandparents, and stuff like that, just out in the wild collecting different foods, just for the fun of it and to help build up our own food supply. Both my parents were children of the Great Depression. And one of the ways the small farming communities up in Minnesota, where I'm originally from, got through that terrible time was through the common knowledge of wild edible plants. It was just something that everyone at those three generations back seemed to know, or at least the country folk. I have two brothers. One is 10 months older than me, and one is 13 months younger than me, what we call Irish triplets. And my parents quickly figured out the only way they're going to survive, us three boys, is if they take us out into the woods every day for at least an hour and usually more. So a lot of my childhood was just up in the woods, in the prairie, wandering the wild places of Minnesota with teachers, my parents, cousins, all that, telling me, my brothers, this is edible, this is edible, this is edible. Grandma used this for toothaches, this sort of thing. So it was just common knowledge. So I love nature. I love the food. You can't really see it, but I'm 6'5" and always hungry, especially when I was a young lad, just growing. So the knowledge I could just walk out and eat a bunch of stuff without having to, get the look from mom and dad was very, very comforting for me. I'm sorry. We have several fire trucks going past my house right now, but it's not here, so we'll continue. All right. So that's where I grew up. At the same time, I knew I wanted to be a scientist. You are born, if you're a scientist, you know that from the day you were born. My original plan was to be an astronaut because I just thought that would be the most awesome thing ever. But at the time, NASA had a height limit of 6'3" on the astronauts. You couldn't be taller than 6'3" because they couldn't make a spacesuit that fit you. So I hit that in the middle school years, and I had to find something different. I was thinking, well, I love botany. Botany is awesome. I love plants. But even more importantly, I loved the powers inherent in the plants, not just the food and the nutrition, but even like red cabbage. If you mix it up and mix it with different colors or different, pH, change the pH, it changes colors. And my dad was always doing these wild experiments with us. He loved science too, still loves it. So chemistry. This led to me really wanting to become a pharmaceutical scientist. I wanted to make medicine. So I ended up getting a master's in medicinal chemistry and a Ph.D. in physical organic chemistry to try and, I don't make molecules. I take the molecules man or God has made and apply them to a task. But I was blessed with multiple research advisors during this career that were really into natural products right at the kind of the beginning of the renaissance of rethinking our attitudes about medicinal plants. It was basically in 1836, the first synthetic medicine was created, a compound called chloral hydrate, which was a sedative. It was like before ether and those sorts of things to knock people out. They could make this chloral hydrate. It's kind of like chloroform, if you remember in the old movies, and it would knock people out. And scientists said, wow, for once we can just synthesize things rather than getting our medicine from plants and mushrooms. And it took off. And just a decision, well, if we can do this, we can do anything with chemistry. And for many, 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 many decades, that was the belief. But in the late 80s and early 90s, when I was going through my college career, there were a few researchers that were going, you know what, let's just take a look at things. Because, you know, if you look back, a lot of medicines came from plants. And so they started looking and discovered, yeah, there's actual compounds, there's actual molecules in here that are working. One thing I like to point out, well, two things I like to point out, and with medicine, and we'll get into the foraging in a bit. I know that's what you're here for, but just with medicine, evolution, those that survival of the fittest, those that responded best to the medicinal plants and mushrooms are the ones that pass these genes on to the point where we are genetically intertwined with medical plants or medicinal plants. But if you're trying to make medicine for the masses, you need mass-produced medicine, because harvesting the plants, preparing the plants, and making the medicine, it's a lot of time-consuming, delicate, hands-on work. That's the same thing with foraging. The hunter-gatherer societies, you know, if they look back, and they actually believed to have more leisure time than we did. The main problem was they could not store calories. So most of their calories came from animal fats, organ meats, that sort of thing. Some seeds, some nuts, some sugars, but a lot of it wasn't storable. Like here in Texas, we have the pecan. Pecan nuts are a wonderful, wonderful source of calories, very fattening. The Native Americans in the area, when the pecans were ripe, they would gorge themselves on to fatten themselves up as much as they could, because they couldn't store the pecans because they would go rancid and filled with bugs and fungus and all that. So the goal was just eat as many as you could right at the beginning. But going out and getting your food from the wild right now, it's time consuming. It's really good exercise, but getting enough for you and your families on top of everything else you have to do right now is difficult. So what I tell people, trying to get all your food from the wild, it's not going to happen unless you have, you know, several acres of land in Texas and, you know, a whole different, you know, some streams and ponds. Then you're good to go. But you can get the important stuff. So like with prepping, my daughters were in piano, and the piano teacher was a Mormon, and she and her husband were in charge of the Houston Mormon cannery. And just talking with them, the Mormon belief is you're supposed to have a year's worth of food on hand. So if something does happen to you financially or your family, like you lose a job or something, you won't be a burden on others. And at the same time, they want to make sure they have enough to share with others. So this kind of set my mindset. When it comes to foraging, it's hard to get calories. You get the calories from the nuts, the seeds, and the tubers, and those are very seasonal and usually don't store well. So those are what you store. Store your rice, store your beans, store your sugar, but store the calories. Have the calories, you know, ready to go when you need them. Use foraging to get the vitamins, the minerals that you need, because then you'll be okay. There's very easy to get the vitamin C, the vitamin A, the you know, all the minerals from the different wild plants. So I think that's going to really be my focus on today's class. Some of the really nutritious plants out there that are growing around right now that will give you what you need now, besides calories. Does that make sense? Does that sound like a good plan? I hope it sounds like a good plan for you.
It sounds like a fabulous plan. Thank you so much. Now, before we get started, you mentioned your advisors and your teachers. Why don't you tell us what are some of the things that you formally studied, and so that people get an understanding of your background?
Oh boy. Okay. So even like going way back in my undergraduate, South Dakota State University, my research advisor there was extracting mushroom compounds, mushrooms from a number of different traditional medicinal mushrooms to really isolate and figure out what was going on with them, which were the compounds actually in that. So that was a lot of work, actually. Then I moved on to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, one of the oldest science schools in the nation up in upstate New York. My undergraduate was actually trying to convert, and don't freak out, but trying to convert a harmless virus, one that is found in everyone's body, it doesn't really do anything, modify it so it would target cancer cells. So I had to change the binding proteins on the surface. And then I had to make a synthetic form of it that incorporated what was called boron 10. Boron 10 is a very interesting isotope of boron, which it has an extra neutron in the nucleus. And when you hit it with some more neutrons, it undergoes a microscopic atomic explosion. So imagine like, you know, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but with a destructive radius of about half a cell. So what this would do then is this modified virus would seek out different cancer cells. Then you would hit it with the neutron beam and it would blow up the cancer. And so that was very, very interesting work. There's still a lot of things doing on it. That's, if you look up one of the treatments for cancer yet is still boron capture or boron neutron capture therapy. They don't use the virus. They have other ways now of getting the boron 10 into the cancer cell that so they can, you know, atomize it. After that, I was actually looking at making artificial enzymes, where if you know anything about chemistry, when two molecules react, they have to come together in a very precise way. And then the energy drive just makes them turn into this other thing. So if you looked at the energy required as you get the things lined up, there's an energy that goes up and what we call transition state energy. And once they get lined up, they immediately flip into this other thing and the energy level goes down. The universe is trying to minimize energy. So what enzymes do is they grab these two molecules and force them into that shape so they don't have to just randomly bounce into each other. So that's how the enzymes work as a catalyst. They speed up the reaction of these other molecules. So to do that, I was taking what was called transition state mimics, where you made a molecule that looked like that transition state. And then I would polymerize it inside a very special polymer that mimicked amino acids. And then you would extract the template model and then add this fake enzyme into a solution with these molecules, and they would go in there and they would be slammed together and turned into this new molecule. So that was pretty exciting. And then I graduated and moved down to Houston, Texas, because I was tired of the winter. I wanted someplace with palm trees. And my plan was to join the pharmaceutical industry here. There's quite a few companies that do that. But instead, I was picked up by the oil industry and said, hey, we need a guy who knows natural products and environmentally friendly stuff, because we want to revamp all our traditionally less friendly oil field chemicals with safe stuff. Can you do that? And it's like, yeah, I think I can. So from there, oh man, I got 16 patents. The first one was using cinnamon as a corrosion inhibitor. The last one was using an enzyme from a bean called a jack bean. This enzyme, when it grabs urea, basically the nitrogen stuff in pee, it changes it into a carbonate ion, which then precipitates and can be basically, think of it as biological cement. So this enzyme, you can mix it with sand and water and then pump urea through it, and it will lock that sand together. It will precipitate calcium carbonate throughout the sand matrix to hold all the sand together. So you can use it as a cement substitute or make furniture, make houses, stabilize the earth beneath buildings, all this sort of thing for it. So good time there. Also things like using different biologically produced sugars as corrosion inhibitors, cleaning out old oil fields with basically a mixture of egg yolk and vinegar, figuring out how to make that work, and just crazy stuff like that. That also led me into working with NASA, because NASA had a program where they would reach out to industry, very diverse. I was working with people from Maytag, the dishwasher people, and me and a few others working on projects for NASA, trying to apply the technology we had created for solving problems in the industry to other space problems. So I've helped with growing plants in space. One of the problems with plants in space is plants don't grow well on even the International Space Station or on spacecrafts, but they're going to need to. And part of it was the domestic plants are too fragile for those sort of environments. And so I led a thing on using some different wild plants that worked out pretty well. Also, the moon colony, going back to the Jack Bean, they plan on making tunnels under the moon. And so they're trying to see if they could use this Jack Bean cement to seal up the tunnels rather than hauling lots of cement, because cement is very heavy to take up to the moon. So just things like that. Then after the oil industry, I wandered into consumer goods for a while, making environmentally friendly paint strippers and caulk remover and things like that, but also in the pharmaceutical products, which finally to Medicine Man Planco, where I now bring back the ancient plants scientifically supported for modern issues. So I've been all over, but during that time, one unifying factor was my love of plants. And when I first moved to Texas, that was in '97, I set up a website called Into the Borderlands. It's no longer there, but it was devoted to hiking and backpacking and kayaking in Texas. And every weekend I'd go out someplace, do an adventure, and then write it up and post it. But what really got people's attention was when I mentioned some of the edible medicinal plants and mushrooms that I was seeing out there. So people started contacting me and saying, "Hey, we're going camping next weekend. Would you come with us and teach us about these plant stuff?" And it's like, "Yeah, well, I'll do that. Any reason to go camping is a good one." In 2008, then the Houston Arboretum contacted me and said, "Hey, we hear you teach wild edible plant classes." And it's like, yes, I do. And from there, it exploded. I actually set up my website, Foraging, Texas. Let's see, can we share it here? What happens if I click that? Is it showing up? I don't know if it's showing up. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so Foraging, Texas, know what your ancestors knew. Currently has over 225 plants on it. And each plant has, and of course, Google hijacks it. All right. So, each, just go away, ads. I just got to say, so the whole thing is done using Blogger to keep it free. And so Blogger puts its own ads on there. But anyway, going back, like Botany, we have multiple pictures, close-ups, full plant, flowers, leaves, all this sort of stuff, what you need, with a ruler, with the tubers, all this sort of stuff. And then even range maps showing where in North America these plants are found, and then where in Texas they're found. So each plant and mushroom has that. So it's filled with all sorts of knowledge there. And like I said, that's been going since 2008. One of the most popular sites on there. That led to a book deal. And Aurora has my old book, and nowadays I have the new Outdoor Adventure Guides, Foraging. Even though I'm based in Texas, these plants are found all over North America. And so they do have a range map here. And so it covers all of North America. But all the plants are also found in Texas. Texas has 14 different ecological zones. So pretty much anything that's found anywhere in North America can be found somewhere in Texas at some time. Is that enough background? I mean, we could just talk all day on that, but I don't think that's what people are here to hear.
Yeah. So, well, I just wanted people to understand that you are presenting this from so much personal experience and guided experience. And so thank you so much for sharing your
Oh,
background.
okay.
And I'll let you dig in and show us what you have on your screen for us. But
Okay.
if anybody has any questions, let's hold them till the end, but put them in the comments. And we just want to hear the wisdom that you want to share for the things that you've learned have helped other people to get into learning about foraging. I do appreciate you sharing that, um, the importance of understanding where that fits in a preparedness or survival ecosystem, and how people can learn and how to use it, what expectations to have for it. And I do have a couple of questions, but I'll save my questions to the end. And so tell us how can we delve deeply, obviously, like we mentioned, so there's the foraging book for North America and with some beautiful recipes, and the new book, but as people are considering getting into your website, understanding the resources and setting expectations for what to learn and how to begin, I'd love for you to take
Oh,
us on this journey to learn about foraging.
okay. So one of the things that happens over and over is people decide they want to learn foraging. They want to learn the edible plants. So they grab the Peterson's Guide to Wild Edibles and they head off in the woods and go, I'm going to learn wild edible plants. And they're looking around at all the trees and the plants, and they're looking at their book and they're flipping through, and they can't figure anything out. There's trees, the Peterson's Guide, it has black and white pictures or line drawings. It doesn't look anything like this. And they just get very frustrated and overwhelmed and go back home. That's not how you do it. The proper way to learn wild edibles, and I got to tell you, you guys, you got it easy now because you have, the internet. But you go out on your doorstep and you look around and see what plants are there, and then you focus your attention on identifying the plants you can see just on your doorstep. What is this? And then you look up and Google it and see, is it edible, is it medicinal? So landscaping plants, if you don't know what the landscaping plants are in your yard, say you bought the house and it was already landscaped, if nothing else, you take a picture of it, you go to the local nursery and you say, okay, what is this plant? Oh, okay, Elaeagnus. All right, write that down. You go back home, you go to the internet, you look up Elaeagnus, you type Elaeagnus into the Google search engine, add the words edible, medicinal behind it, and it will bring up any information or websites that talk about the edible uses or medicinal uses of the common landscaping shrub Elaeagnus. Most likely it'll be my website, Foraging Texas, but you'll learn that the berries are very, very delicious and very high in vitamin C. Cool. Okay, we got Elaeagnus. What about privet? Ooh, privet, not so good. There's some toxicity issues there. Okay, what about heavily bamboo, nandina? Borderline. There's medicinal uses for the wood. The berries, if you take the seeds out, are edible after cooking, but not great. But you go through it and you identify the landscaping plants. What are they? Are any of them edible? You'll be surprised. A lot of them actually have edible or medicinal uses. Then you look at the trees around you, and even if it's just a pine tree or not a pine tree. If they're pine trees, you're good because there's not that many pine trees in Texas, and they all have the same edible and medicinal uses. The pine needles, tea from green, fresh pine needles, is extremely rich in vitamin C, something you need every day. The secret, though, with the pine needles is you do not boil them. Vitamin C gets broken down once the temperature gets up above 184 degrees. So at boiling temperatures, at 225 degrees, it even more quickly gets broken down. So you just want to crush up like a cup of pine needles, chop it up, crush up. You want to manually rupture the cell walls of the green, fresh pine needles so that the vitamin C in it can get out into your hot water. If you have a thermometer, just take the temperature up to about 170 degrees. Put the cup of crushed, ground up pine needles in a quart of hot water, let it soak 15 minutes, strain out the plant, and now you will have all the vitamin C you need for the day. So identify the pine trees. And just the fact that, yes, they are a pine tree. Uh, there are a few pine, people think maybe are a pine tree, like the cedar tree. The cedar is not a pine. The cypress is not a pine. If you have a question on whether or not it's a pine tree, again, go to the nursery, take a picture of it. With the trees, some of the plant apps are getting up to the point where they at least will get you into the right genus. Maybe not the exact species, but you can do that. Or you can just Google identify pine tree and, what am I looking for there? But the internet is your friend there. Okay, so you got the pine trees. Now you got to think to yourself, did I ever see acorns on any tree? Because acorns, they are only found in oak trees. So now you have to learn the oak trees that might be around you. And either, again, going back to like the plant app, picture this, something like that, just to confirm the tree you think is an oak tree is actually an oak tree. Because the acorns are actually a good source of food. They're high in starch. They are fairly bitter, but they have other uses as far as food goes. But you want to know those. So you got 2 trees down. And then it's just a matter of what other trees are around, identify those, and then again, Google, is this, the maple? What's edible on the maple? Well, the young leaves can be used as a salad green, or they can be fermented like sauerkraut or kimchi. The seeds, the helicopter seeds that come from maples, those can be roasted like pumpkin seeds and eaten. So, and also the inner bark, the cambium layer, is a source of calories, but hopefully you already get calories stored. So is when you start cutting into the cambium layer of the tree, you risk killing the tree. If you're taking the seeds or the leaves, you're pretty safe. But if you're starting to cut through the skin of the tree, then you're going to run into problems. So you've identified the landscaping plants, you've identified the trees in your yard and everywhere else in the neighborhood. Now you're starting to get an idea of what you're looking at. So at that point, you want to go get a book called Botany in a Day. And I should have had this out here. But Botany in a Day, what it does is it teaches you the structural features that botanists use to classify plants into different families, like the pine family, the oak family, the violet family, the nightshade family, all these. And it teaches you, what are the structural features, how the leaves will be arranged, what the vein pattern in the leaf will be, what the flower structure is, where are the flowers located on the plant. Are they in bundles? Are they single? Or is it in just a dangling line? Is it in an umbel? Different things like that. So that teaches you how to identify the family of the plant by the key structural features. And that's where you start to blossom. Once you realize key structural features is where it's at. When you're trying to identify a plant, I tell people you want to match at least 5 structural features of this mystery plant you're looking at with whatever book you happen to be using to properly identify the plant. So like in the in the Outdoor Adventure Guide Foraging, I have description, whoops over here. What are the leaves like? What is the stem like? What are the flowers like? What is the root like? And using the botanical terms, but by matching 5, and it can be, there's dozens. We already talked about how are the leaves attached. Are they opposite? Are they opposite alternating? Are they just alternating? Are they whorled? All these different ways. How are the leaves attached? That's a structural feature. What is the edge of the leaf like? Is there serrations? Is there bumps? Is there lobes? Are there hair on the leaves? Are there hair just on the top? Is there hair on the underside? Is there hair on the stems? Which way is the hair pointing? You can tell that by feeling it. Like if you rub an elm leaf from the base to the tip, it will be smooth. But then if you rub from the tip to the base, it will be rough, like a cat's tongue, because all the hairs on the surface of the leaves are pointing in the same direction towards the tip of the leaf. So when you're rubbing with the hairs, it's smooth, and rubbing against it, it's going against the hairs. So, what direction is it going? What color is it? Where is it growing? Is it growing in the sun? Is it growing in the shade? The ecosystem, which it is a structural feature. So all these things tie in. That's the way you identify the mystery plant with the resource guide you're going. So you go, aha, this is a lamb's quarter, because I see it has the alternating leaves. and the stem has it's not round, it has like columns through it. And where the branch meets the main stem, there's some purple here. So these are structural features. The edge of the leaf, it's a diamond-shaped leaf, and it has some sharp points on it. Aha. And if I crush it up, it has a very distinctive musky smell, the lamb's quarter. So smell is even a structural feature. What the seeds look like, where the seeds look like. I get a lot of people sending me pictures and saying, what is this? And it's just like a green ball, and there's no leaves. You know, they say, okay, was it on a vine? Was it on a tree? Was it on a bush? How big is it? Can you cut it in half so I can see the inside? Because I need to see these structural features if I'm going to try and identify a plant, you know, on the internet for someone that will then probably eat it if I say it's edible. Structural features, 5 structural features between the plant and whatever resource guide you're using. Do you have any questions on that, or should we jump in some more here? All right. So I mentioned lamb's quarter. Oh,
Well, I actually wanted to mention that you do have a page on foragingtexas.com where you have book reviews, and you have links that people can go to. So I'm going to go ahead and.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm very, very excited that you shared this resource. So if you go to the Foraging Texas website, you will find under the book reviews the Botany in a Day, and you can click there. I know that you mentioned that, so I just wanted to keep people a visual of, you know, if they didn't catch it, they can find it on your
Right.
website. And you know, this is very important. I remember taking a plant biology class, and that was actually the most exciting lesson for me, was learning that once you learn how to identify the plants by their leaves and the way that the lines and all of the appropriate terms, right? But all of the veins and everything, that if you get that right, I mean, it's like you can't really go wrong. So learning
Right.
the foundations is really important. But that's really all I wanted to jump in and say.
Okay. And it is a little work, but it's not as much work as you might think it is. It's not like learning a new language or anything. You have visual aids. You can come up with different mental imagery. Like when it comes to veins in a tree, there's basically pinnate, palmate, parallel. So pinnate, I say you have a center pin, and then the other veins come off it, like branches off a Christmas tree. So if you have just one center, a single pin going down the center of the leaf, and the other veins come off that, that is pinnate. Palmate, it's like a hairy gorilla's hand. Instead of just one vein, center vein, you'll have multiple thick veins coming off the base of the leaf, going outwards to the edge, and then off those, each one of those, you'll have finer veins coming off that. So again, thinking like a hairy hand or a hairy gorilla hand, that is palmate. And then parallel would be a lot of the grasses and spiderwort and a few others like that, where you just have a bunch of veins parallel to each other. They're tight against each other. There's no veins branching off them. It's just a whole bunch of tubes that run from the base of the leaf to the end of the leaf. There's also orbicular, and that is found in round leaves, where if you have a round leaf like dollarweed and the stem goes in the center, and you have veins radiating out from that center of the leaf out to the edge. But there's not that many plants out there that have just pure round leaves. So if you can just remember pinnate, palmate, parallel, you already know the vein patterns you got to look at. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. One of the things us foraging instructors all around the nation, we all have decided that to make it easier on all you, in our books, in our lectures, in our websites, we'll focus on the same structural features. So once you know the arrangement of leaves, the vein pattern of leaves, the edge of the leaves, a few more things about flowers, you'll be able to use any of our books equally well. So we try and make it easier for you because we want you to know this. All right. So lamb's quarter. I mentioned that. Actually, I want to bring up purslane here because this is one of the most common wild edible weeds especially through the Texas summer. And it's kind of a thick, succulent looking plant. You'll find it growing in your flower beds, in the sidewalks, in your driveway, places where you think plants wouldn't grow. And most gardeners that see this growing in their garden or their flower beds just yank it out of the ground and throw it aside. What they don't realize is they're just spreading it even more. So the purslane is actually very loaded with nutrients. So bring it up here. So on all my plants here, I get the scientific name, how abundant is it, because that tells you how much of it you can take. What are the edible parts? How do you eat the edible parts? Where do you find it? When do you find it? And what is its nutritional value? So with the purslane, there's a bunch of vitamin A, vitamin C, several of the Bs, a number of minerals. But one of the really cool things about purslane is it is loaded with omega-3 fatty acid. Normally, you only get the omega-3 fatty acids from different animal fats and oils, like fish oil, cod liver oil, the cow fat, cow suet, that sort of thing. So that's where those normally hang out. So having a plant-based version is really exciting. The omega-3 fatty acids are very important for brain and heart health. But also you got the vitamins A, C, and the Bs. Again, very critical. And let me also mention one other thing. While you're outside gathering these plants, you're producing the proper vitamin D. Most people in really the Western world nowadays are low on vitamin D because they've been taught from an early age that if they expose any part of themselves to the sun, they will die of cancer immediately. That's not the case. We evolved to be out in the sun. Our skin, you don't want to be in there all day and burn to a crisp. So obviously, there's some problems there. But the being out in the sun produces vitamin D that our bodies need for health, mental and physical health. But it's a very important nutrient. You can take a vitamin D supplement, but that's a D3, not a D2. Big blackboard of science that we're not going to go into. Sunlight's better. So being out foraging while you're gathering your food, you're helping your body by getting the sunlight. So really good. If you break the purslane open, it will either not lose any fluid or a little bit of clear sap may run from the cut edge there. This is important because there is a mimic that looks very, very vaguely like the purslane. So on the left here, we have the purslane, and on the right, we have spotted spurge. They both have a reddish stem. They both have oval-shaped leaves, but the arrangement of the leaves is very different. The thickness of the stem is very different. But one of the key structural features is if you cut or break the spurge, the stem, it will bleed a white. So the color of the sap can be a structural feature that's important for properly identifying both edible plants and poisonous plants, because you want to make sure you know how to do both. So purslane, right now, an absolutely fantastic wild edible. Another one that's out and about quite a bit right now is the, sunflower wild, yes. Oops. Okay, so the wild sunflowers, these are all over the place. The seeds of the wild sunflower are actually very high in oil, but they're so small that they're almost useless to humans. Leave those for the birds. What I like from here are just the petals. And then also the little unopened flower buds. Think of these unopened flower buds. If you're making a curry or a chili or a stew, like a venison stew, you can drop these in there and they cook up. There's no way to describe them other than like cooked sunflower buds, but they turn into a nice soft sort of thing if they're slow cooked in a juicy thing. You don't necessarily want to eat them raw. Raw, they're kind of bristly, but cooking them softens them into just a nice little chunk of veggie material, high in fiber, minerals. We got here. There's some carbohydrates, proteins. Also, the flower petals, that yellow color, that's an indication of antioxidants. You might have heard, eat the rainbow when it comes to berries, brightly colored berries like blueberries and strawberries and raspberries and grapes. The more color you're getting from your food, especially natural colors from plants and from fruit, they all are very important antioxidants for the body. Plus, they look good. The petals, you can throw them in salads, you can throw them in curry, you can sauerkraut them, you can blend them into a pasta. I make a very nice sunflower petal infused ravioli where the pasta and the cheese has the sunflower petals into it. Lots of different things you can do to just bump up the food you have. All right. Another really good one, especially for Texas. Where is it? There we go. Is a prickly pear. So we're at the time of the year now where in most of Texas, the prickly pear cactus pads are past the ideal time to eat. Let's see, where is it? Oh, I don't have the. Yeah. You want to get the pads in this early spring to late spring, basically the spring, when they're still really tender and dark green and soft and flexible and have not really developed much in the way of thorns. You still have to scrape those thorns off, but or burn them off. But usually I'll just scrape them and burn them just because you don't want to accidentally swallow a piece of the thorn or the glochage, the really tiny ones. But after that, you have just a big flat green bean. One of the things I like doing is making a green bean casserole, but instead of using green beans, I use sliced up prickly pear cactus and throw it in there to play the role of the beans. Later on, we have the flowers, and these yellow flowers are very good. You can eat them raw. You can add them to salads. You can put them on your sandwiches. You notice the yellow color, so they have some antioxidants that are good for you. But they're just another good addition to, especially raw or chopped up and added to the prickly to eggs to make a prickly pear cactus flower omelet. Very good. And then, of course, the fruit or the tunas, very high in sugar. So this is a source of calories. The easiest thing I find to do instead of trying to eat the fruit, because they're still going to be covered with these tiny glotids that are, no pun intended, a pain to get off. Normally, I just juice the fruit, squeeze it through like some cheesecloth, mash up, squeeze all the juice out, and then just drink the juice as like nature's Kool-Aid. It's very good. It has kind of a raspberry flavor to it. The seeds of the prickly pear cactus are edible. They're high in protein. So you can store the seeds. Generally, they are roasted before eaten, but then there's another source of protein. Another good one out right now is the wild violet. Let me scroll down to that. So if you're out in the woods right now, you'll find these little wild violets. They have little heart-shaped leaves. They have that palmate vein structure that I was talking about, where you have multiple veins starting at the base, going to the edge, and then secondary veins coming off that. Oops, didn't want to go there. Violet flowers. These are found all over like I said, in the summertime. They are found in the woods, more often around hardwoods rather than pines. So if the area is just all pines, then you may have a little harder time finding them. But the wild violets, they are loaded with vitamin A and vitamin C. But in particular, vitamin C, but both of them, almost the total amounts. If you eat lots of them, and we're talking like a big old bowl of them, they do cause diarrhea. So keep that in mind. But for vitamin A, vitamin C, these are some great things. Another good thing about these is they grow very well in pots. So if you find some, you can transplant them into pots inside your house and just have them. So the leaves can be eaten raw. They can be chopped up and added to soup, stews, curries, lasagna, pasta, any of that sort of thing. Think of it almost as like a spinach, if you will. All right. Flavor, one of my favorite is goldenrod. So a lot of people will say, oh, goldenrod, I have terrible goldenrod allergies. Probably not. You probably have ragweed allergies. Goldenrod pollen is very sticky. It is a bee and butterfly pollinated plant. But at the same time that these bright yellow goldenrod flowers are appearing, the ragweed with its small invisible green flowers is dumping tons of pollen into the air, triggering a bunch of people's allergies. So this is not ragweed. It just happens to unfortunately bloom at the same time as ragweed, but the ragweed flowers are pretty much invisible. And so people just blame the goldenrod. But both the flowers and the leaves make an excellent seasoning for food. So I'll take the young leaves, and like if you look at the goldenrod, it will have alternating leaves. The stem will be smooth. It will be dark lower on, and then up at higher, it will be green. Usually what I'll do is I'll just take this very tip cluster of about 5 leaves, snip that off, chop it up, and just add it to whatever I'm cooking to add it's going to be a goldenrod flavor. It's very difficult to explain the flavors of wild plants because there's not a culturally agreed mental image of the flavor. It's whatever your particular tongue focuses on, which of the molecules in this plant your tongue goes, oh, I recognize that molecule. It's going to taste like this. So to me, the goldenrod tastes vaguely like black licorice. Other people say, no, it has more of a ginger flavor. Others say, no, it has more of a cinnamony flavor. Others say it has more of an allspice flavor. It really depends on your individual tongue. But you can always crush up a little and taste it. Also remember, if you're cooking, like adding it to a stir fry, it will alter the flavor some, usually improving it even more. But this is a great thing, again, I will chop this up and add it to cup of soup. I will add it to pretty much everything that I cook, just because it's really abundant. And normally it just grows a single stalk. But if you cut it here in this green part, at the very top of the stem, the plant will keep growing and put out multiple stems. So instead of just producing one stem with one set of flowers at the top, it will now put out 3 to 5 stems. If you let those grow, each one of those will produce flowers. The goldenrod flowers are usually the last flower of the year for bees to harvest the nectar from before winter sets in. So it's very important for the bees, but the flowers taste good to us humans too. So by pruning the plant earlier on from 1, so it grows 4 to 5, you've increased the flowers for the bees. So if you take 2 of those, the bees still have more flowers than they would have if you hadn't taken anything. So help the bees harvest a little bit of goldenrod. Another very common one, something that I am trying to convince more and more people to add as a ground cover instead of grass. It's a native Texas plant called frog fruit. Frog fruit. And it has a very distinctive little flower. It almost, to me, looks almost more like a pineapple with a ring of tiny white flowers. It's very hard to get a good picture of the flower. But the main thing you want from this is the leaves. The leaves are a very nutritious spinach substitute. They are a little tough raw, so I prefer steaming them or otherwise sauteing them in something to soften them up. But the nutritional values, scroll back up here. So vitamins, they have multiple vitamins. I haven't finished all the checking what all vitamins it has in it, but A, B, C, the early alphabet of vitamins are in the frog fruit. It's a very durable plant. It doesn't grow very tall. It only grows maybe 3-4 inches deep. It loves dry, so it doesn't need much water. And it spreads very rapidly, and it just makes a really nice low water, low maintenance, almost no maintenance grass substitute. but way easier to take care of than grass. By the way, grass, St. Augustine and all those, not edible. Grass seeds are edible, but most of them are too tiny to do anything with. All right. One that always surprises people is the Black Nightshade. And this is another one that just has all sorts of vitamins and minerals and also antioxidants. But when you hear nightshade, you think poisonous nightshades. You forget that potatoes, tomatoes, bell peppers, cayenne peppers, they're all members of the nightshade family too. And there are several. So the black pepper, let's see if I can get a good picture here. Bring it up. Yeah. So this will be a small bush that just kind of pops up in your garden and some waste area. It will have small, little, tiny white flowers with 5 petals, and the petals point backwards from the center stamens. The center stamen here will be yellow, but then the white petals will stick backwards. And then it will produce a cluster fruit. The flowers appear in clusters of like 3 to 7. Then you'll get, each one of these will turn into a fruit. Each fruit is very, very small, but they have a wonderful sweet grape-like flavor when they're ripe. They're ripe when they're black. When they're green and speckled, they're not ripe. When they're green and speckled, they do contain a little bit of poison called solanine. If you're familiar with green potatoes. So if a potato tuber gets exposed to the sunlight, that part of the skin that's exposed to the sunlight turns green. That green is due to a poisonous compound called solanine. That's why people tell you, don't eat the green potatoes. Well, they're right. They're poisonous. You can cut that part off. But once the berries ripen into this black color, they're actually very, very, very tasty. They're like little grapes. They're very sweet. In my new book, The Outdoor Adventures Guide Foraging, I have a recipe for the tarts made with them somewhere in here. Yeah, I'm not going to waste my time looking. But yeah, the leaves, also can be eaten, but you do want to cook the leaves. Cooking does remove the little bit of solanine that's in the leaves, but think of the black nightshade leaves as a pot herb, one that you do have to cook. All right, another summertime plant. The mallow. So this is a very common yardweed. This is practically a superfood. So these mallows, very high in minerals, vitamins A and C, and protein. So they put down fairly deep roots that go down in the soil and start sucking all the minerals from the soil back up into the leaves as a way of the goal. The mallows are nurse plants. When you have a disturbed area, an area that's been tore up, every time it rains, the water leaches the minerals deeper and deeper into the soil. And so the top layer of soil becomes inhospitable to maintaining plant life. Also, it just gets washed away. So the mallow shows up, it puts down a deep taproot, it starts pulling these minerals back up into the leaves, and the leaves form a thick mat that just protect the soil from the direct rain so the soil doesn't get washed away. But absolutely loaded with vitamins, minerals, protein. It's a fairly neutral flavor. You can eat it raw. Most people, again, cook it like a spinach. Around Texas, we have the buffalo gourd. And this one's kind of interesting. This is a vine. It is in the melon family. It has these very large heart-shaped leaves. I don't know if you can see, there's my foot here. The leaf is bigger than my foot. I have a size 13 foot. So these are very large leaves. This is a 12-inch ruler there. So these are very big leaves. And they produce these little, just slightly smaller than golf ball sized fruit. Do not eat the fruit. It is extremely bitter. Some of you out there might remember the Mr. Yuck stickers your parents would put on wiper fluid and cleaning supplies, and you knew if you saw Mr. Yuck not to eat it. Well, a lot of times, after Mr. Yuck, chemists found a compound from these. It's called Bittrex now. That's just so incredibly bitter that you can't eat it. It just a sip of it, and it's just like, this is terrible. You spit it out. The seeds of these melons, though, are like pumpkin seeds. So when the melons appear, you can collect the melons, clean every little bit of flesh from the seeds of the melons, and then roast them like regular pumpkin seeds and go ahead and eat them, and you'll get all the benefits of pumpkin seeds. They're actually very good once you do that. They also have a giant root that is considered medicinal, not edible. So you can't treat this big tuber like a potato. But if you're looking for a potato, we're entering the gay feather season. Oops, where is it? There. Hold on. Oh, there it is. Okay, very common wildflower around here is the gay feather. And you'll see this out in sunny fields. It'll just be a bunch of purple spikes, about waist high. And if you look really closely, the hairs are very stringy and they just look like a ball, like the koosh balls. If you remember the rubbery balls with all little tentacles on it. The base of this is an edible tuber. So there are some calories there, but really probably still want to focus on storing calories, because if you dig this up, you kill the plant. So a number of the Native Americans in the Texas plains actually had a rule against digging up and eating the gay feathers, eating the tubers. When I heard that and had it explained to me, I realized it was very similar to up in Minnesota, the Native Americans up there that I hung out with the Ojibwe. And the Ojibwe had a rule: you would never kill a porcupine. The reason the Ojibwe would never kill a porcupine is because if they were starving, the one animal that they could still, capture, just basically beat to death with a stick or a rock, was a porcupine. And the porcupines were loaded with fats and the calories they needed to get the nutrition they needed. So the thought was you left the porcupines alone so that when you were starving, they were there, and then you ate them. That was the same with across the prairies here, the Native Americans across the Great Plains, starting here in Texas and going up into South Dakota. These are really easy to find. They're very plentiful, but you don't eat them until there's nothing else left, because you wanted them there. They were the emergency food supplies they had hidden under the bed or hidden in the closet, something like that, were the tubers of the gay feather. Let's see, another good, smartweed. All across Texas, there is a plant called smartweed, and actually all across North America, smartweed. You'll find it usually in more damp areas, along creeks, along ponds. It has that parallel vein structure. Sorry, no, this one has the pinnate. It has the pinnate vein structure. It has alternating leaves. At the top, it has these little clusters of tiny white flowers. If you like hot, spicy peppers, if you want to add spice and heat to your food, you want these leaves because they have the same capsium in it that the hot peppers have. So if you don't have hot peppers, you can just take a few of these leaves from the smartweed, and it does the same sort of thing. So you can use it to spice up your beans, your rice, your pasta, wherever you would want to add that extra zing of flavor. Oh, it's another good one. Oops, where'd it go? Cleavers. Not this time of year, but during the winter months, there is Cleavers, aka sticky weed, aka Velcro weed. This is that plant that clings to you, and the seeds cling to you, and they cling to your dog, and they cling to your sheep. That's where it gets the name Velcro weed or sticky weed. These are actually loaded with vitamin C. If you're going to eat them, you want to chop them up really fine because you don't want to have so many hooks on a big piece that the big piece gets caught when you're in your throat while you're trying to swallow it. But these things are loaded with vitamin C. I generally make a tea out of them where I will just dry the cleavers and then crush them up and have like a vitamin C tea every day. If for some reason you don't have pine needles, which are another great source, you can also use the cleavers as a very good source of vitamin C. Another good source of vitamin C, very common right now, is the Indian strawberry. Now, I find this plant very interesting. I get so many emails from people saying, hey, I have these red berries growing under my trampoline. Are they poisonous? It's like, no, those are Indian strawberries. They're actually quite good for you. So the reason they're growing under the trampolines is they like shade and they like water. So they like the rainy summer months. This year, probably not so many, but a lot of the times of the year, they will just have dozens and dozens of these under your trampoline or some other shade-giving structure that still has lawn underneath. The grass dies and the Indian strawberry moves in. So it prefers kind of a shady, sandy, damp, but it also grows in clay. The berries themselves are rather tasteless, but they're loaded with antioxidants. Antioxidants are very important for health. The leaves and the flowers, they look like strawberry flowers. The leaves and the flowers, they are loaded with vitamin C. Remember, vitamin C, you need that every day. You cannot store vitamin C. You cannot make vitamin C. So you have to take a certain amount of vitamin C in every day. It's around 175 milligrams is what the the FDA has decided a older, overweight, smoker, all sorts of COVID, the type of people that are really primed for dying from COVID, they require the most vitamin C, but it's still only 175 milligrams a day. And that's just a handful of leaves made into a tea. So a really good thing there. I'm sure if it's not in your yard, and I will say these maps, like here, the green is the counties where it's found. These maps are created by the government. So the maps are created by the USDA. They are the responsibility of different field agents when they're out. When they get back into the office after being out on a piece of land, they're supposed to record all the plants that they saw out there. They don't always do that. And so think of these state maps as guidelines. If you see a county that's green, a lot of times it's a fairly safe assumption that all the counties around it very likely have that plant too. All right. Another really common edible nightshade is the ground cherry. And these look like little tiny tomatillas. They have these husks, and inside the husks is a little fruit. And the fruit is only about the size of my fingertip here. But when they're ripe, when the husk is turned, gray and dry, these are very, very sweet. They're like the sweetest tomatoes you've ever had. Absolutely delicious. The rest of the time, they do have that solanine in it, so you don't normally eat them raw, like the fruit when it's raw and green. If you cook it into a salsa, that helps remove the poison, and then you can eat it. So the unripe fruit, lots of cooking, small amounts, but the ripe fruit, it's a sweet tomato. It's absolutely delicious. The nutrients in here, a lot of vitamin A, they are loaded with B3 and also C. So a very good thing. These are more of a water-loving plant and shade. So if you have a kind of a stream or even an irrigation ditch or a stock pond, These grow really well there. This is actually my mom's favorite wild edible. All right. Any questions at this point? So I'm basically just popping around. As you can see, there's all sorts of plants. There's currently 225 plants on the Foraging Texas website. You can search by use. So does it have caffeine? Is it a source of calories? Can it be used as a fish poison? Medicinal? Can you eat it raw and salad? Is it a seasoning? Can you use it as soap, tea, tobacco? And then by area, where in North America is it found? What time of year is it found? If you happen to already know the name of the plant, like you've already identified it, in your yard, a landscaping plant or a tree in your yard, there's a little search box, and it's actually under the live thing there. But there's a search box up in the upper left-hand corner where you can put in the name of the plant, and it will find it on my website. So at this point, I'd really like to get some questions if there are any out there. Oops. You're muted. Aurora, you're muted.
It happens all the time, as much as I would like to avoid it. So I do have some questions for you. You mentioned, actually, I've heard you say that you, in a previous class, that you try to eat cactus every day. Do you want to, you talk to us about cactus today. You want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Okay. So I eat cactus every day for medicinal benefits. One of the ways medicinal scientists tries and finds new medicines, new molecules that have never been used as medicines before, is they will study a particular culture with a special diet and then see if there's any health issues that don't occur in that culture. Because the thought then is most likely it has something to do with their food they're eating. Well, some researchers are doing that. It actually in this case, it was kind of backwards, because it was noticed a while back that incidences of cancer in the American Southwest are much lower than the rest of North America. And at first they were thinking, well, maybe there's a genetic component to it. But it turned out anyone who moved from anywhere in the world to the American Southwest, if they've lived there at least 10 years, the incidences and risk of cancer dropped significantly. And so they're wondering, okay, what's going on here? A lot of study went into it, but they found that it was the prickly pear cactus. In the pads and in the fruit, there are compounds that help fight cancer. So it won't completely, if you eat prickly pear cactus every day, I'm not going to say you'll never get cancer, but it drastically reduces the chances of cancer. There's a website, pubmed.gov. It is the electronic database of medicinal science, and all the different research papers that any scientist has done in the realm of medicine is in this database. And you can just type in prickly pear cactus cancer, and you'll get like 6 pages of research articles on different types of cancers that they found it slows down, inhibits, or greatly reduces. So there's that. But also the slime. If you've ever had prickly pear cactus, it's slimy. Okra is slimy. A number of wild violets are slimy. That slime is the mucilage. It's perfectly designed to grab sugar. And so by grabbing the sugar, instead of immediately leaving your digestive tract and causing a big spike in your blood sugar, it can only slowly get away from the mucilage and get into your sugar. So along with the whole anti-cancer sort of things, the prickly pear cactus also helps with blood sugar. I have normal blood sugar, but I have a sweet tooth. I've never escaped the caveman part of my brain that when it discovers something sweet to eat, it says, you have to eat all of this because you don't know when you're going to get it again. So just gorge yourself, like I mentioned with the pecans at the beginning of the talk. So I have to fight that really hard, and I don't always succeed. So, but by taking the slimy foods like the okra, like the prickly pear cactus pad, those help bind the sugar so you don't get the huge sugar spike. So I'm much less likely to develop a insulin resistance. Cinnamon is another thing. It works in a different mechanism, but cinnamon is another great way of helping control blood sugar. I just swallowed a bug, but it was an edible one, so that's okay. My daughters, they like their coffee. Coffee is basically a milkshake with a little bit of coffee. And I say, okay, if you're going to do that, make sure there's cinnamon added to your big iced coffee there, because that will help prevent or greatly reduce the chance of developing an insulin resistance and diabetes. So things like that. There are certain foods, the goldenrod I include in my food every day, my drink, because it's really great for the circulatory system. Again, going back to my size, when you're really big, you have a lot of blood vessels. And if they start to leak, it can cause all sorts of problems. So the goldenrod has been shown to just help knit together fluid holding tissues like the blood vessels.
So
what else?
I'm curious. You mentioned in your oiled field services work cinnamon. So did you say like anti-corrosion?
Yeah, corrosion inhibitor.
So is that why you also, so is there a pattern or that carries over to why you were suggesting eating it all along?
No, the mechanisms are totally different. Ironically, the specific molecules involved are the same, but they work in different things. The cinnamon aldehyde molecule is perfectly designed to mesh into the electron clouds on the surface of the metal. And then the areas of high electron density is where the corrosion is going to occur, but that's also where the cinnamon goes to. And so it blocks the metal from corroding because you got cinnamon toast steel on it.
I was just curious, with a lot of things that are good for you and things like that being like antioxidants and different things like that, if there was a correlation there. So I'm so glad that you shared with us that prevention is, you just do the best you can, but if you have that kind of lifestyle and you just become a better steward of the body and the life that you've been given, and that one thing may not be the cure-all or the whole answer, but if you're combining so many things and your lifestyle is about taking care of what you have, then you're going to have a whole lot better return of your investment than if you don't care at all, right? It's just creating that momentum, I think.
Yeah. Hard times are even harder when you're not healthy.
Right.
And, there's a genetic side to health and stuff, but there is a lot of personal choice stuff. And that's what's so galling, because it's like, dang, it's my own fault. I can't blame anyone else.
I actually tell people, if you're going to put food away, you actually put better food away for stressful times, because you want to be healthier when you're stressed, and you want to eat the very best foods when you're stressed, and not like the cheap food that you wouldn't want to eat, because then you're like stressing your body out. So you mentioned in survival and preparedness, you want to understand and have the right expectations for foraging. Now, when it comes to animals and like homesteading animals, livestock, your poultry and your sheep and cows and things like that, are there any weeds that you found that would be recommended to plant for the animals to forage? So more, instead of like a survival situation where you would just plant it in a survival situation, you would just have it and cultivate and have that ecosystem there. Are there any recommendations that come to mind?
So it really depends on the animal you're doing. Like chickens, any of the weeds really, edible or not, a lot of them they'll just scratch up and peck up and eat. Sheep, more of the grasses. Pigs, you want nuts and high protein foods. So protein, the lamb's quarter, the purslane, even some of the black nightshade, they'll probably eat that without any problems. I also want to say, if you are, so I go with an ancestral diet, which is nose to tail on the animals and then the wild foods. So if you are raising livestock and all you're taking is the meat and some of the fat, if you're not taking the liver and the kidneys and the lungs and the brains, you're missing out on some of the most nutritious parts of the animal. So you might want to start now, just looking up recipes while there's still an internet. How do I cook pig's lungs? That's my favorite. My mom's favorite was the pig's lungs. Mine is the loin. My dad's is the pig brain. He loves pig's brains with some, like, in a gravy on some sausage, like a sausage, a pig's brain gravy on biscuits sort of thing. So learn how to use all the parts of the animals that you're raising, because it's going to save you money and it's going to make you healthier in the long run.
I appreciate you saying that too, because I was talking with a farmer this week who they asked for as many parts from the butcher. They actually have to be able to resell it. They have to use a approved butcher, and they wasted about 60% of the animal. And I was pretty much angry. I was like, how can you waste so much? They didn't get organs, they didn't get bones, you know, it was just
Oh
only
yeah, the bones of stalk. Yeah, crack it open, get
um
the marrow.
yeah. So I
Heck
was
yeah.
like, okay, plan B, please. Like, let's not waste it. And you know, even you know, we don't believe in eating blood raw, but for
Yeah.
composting and for the
Yeah.
plants, it's such a great thing that was just wasted, you know. But if you
Mm-hmm.
learn how to harvest the animals on site, and you're able to create an ecosystem where people come and become part of the process of learning, and then they get to take home on some of the meat, like as a co-op or something like that, then you
Right.
cut out all that waste. You know, we can just use 100%,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and plus the learning, right?
Yeah. Well, and something you said about using the blood as fertilizer. So one of the things that makes a lot of wild edible plants super nutritious is they are hyper accumulators. If there's calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, iron in the soil, they'll suck that up into the leaves at a much higher concentration than a lot of the domesticated plants. So if you're not using the blood, you know, to make blood sausage, my mom also loved that. You know, put it in your compost. Make the soil iron rich. After you've cracked the bones and got out all the marrow and boiled them down and made your stock, take the bones and crush them up and add them to your compost, because then you're going to add the calcium and the phosphorus to again to your soil that the plants will then suck up and give back to you.
That's awesome. So I have another question that was asked. So if there are good forage grass that is kind of drought resistant, is the one that you mentioned the only one, or are there any other
No,
recommendations?
so here's the ironic thing about Texas. When the cattle people moved in, there was a misconception that the Texas grass the cattle would not eat. So for decades, there was a huge eradication of the native Texas grasses and replaced with like Western, like European grasses, which weren't really drought resistant or anything. Eventually, they figured out, oh, we made a mistake. The cattle can eat the grass, but so much of it was lost. So the basic thing is you want to get the native grasses, and in particular the native grasses for your particular ecosystem in Texas. Remember, I said there are 14 different ecosystems in Texas, and so each one had several grasses that was a little bit better for it. There's a number of seed companies that you can get, seedsource.com, or if you Google Native American seeds, but seedsource.com, they have seed packages for what you're trying to do and where you're located in Texas. Are you trying to raise cattle? Okay, you want these grasses. Are you trying to just have a pretty landscape? Okay, you want this. Do you want flowers for bees? You want these. But again, it's specific for the region of Texas in which you're in, and with the native plants that grew there. So that's a great resource if you're especially trying to grow grasses.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I love that. So another question that had come in is, you know, again, with thinking, a lot of people are thinking about foraging or getting into foraging because of survival, and you mentioned that's kind of how many families learned, right, and survived. So if there was like one forage crop that you could grow and your life depended on that, have you ever singled one out as like this one would be one that
Okay.
I would want to have around?
So non-calories, lamb's quarter. Lamb's quarter, it's loaded with a whole bunch of different vitamins and minerals. It grows in, from Texas all the way up into Canada, but just very super nutritious. The leaves are edible. The seeds are edible. Bring it up here. And it produces lots of seeds in the late summer. And so you get lots more. You can freeze it. You can dehydrate it. You know, once it's dried, you can just make it into a powder that you can just store and add to other food. But it's very easy to grow lots and lots and lots of lamb's quarter. You can get the seeds online. It's a little late for this time of year already, though. You could you can sprout it and do like the microgreens also. So yeah, if I was like going to Mars and had just the one plant to take with me, it would be the lamb's quarter. Because as far as growing conditions and nutritional value, it's the top.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then on that same kind of thought, is there a fruit-bearing plant that grows well in Texas, or like that you've seen is resilient, maybe drought resistant and nutritious? Is there anything that comes to mind for that?
Yep, the mulberry. So,
and I can tell you from personal experience, we had everything else die, and there was this one old mulberry tree that we thought was dead, but no, it produced after all the freezes and crazy things we've had.
Yeah.
We were
so
amazed.
a mature mulberry tree will produce more edible fruit than any other tree out there. We're talking like especially a big one, it can be 100 pounds of fruit or more. Each fruit is very small, but they dehydrate well. You can mash them up and make a fruit leather out of them. You can freeze them, but you can use them any of the ways you would use the dewberries or blackberries. But along with the fruit, the leaves of the mulberry tree are also edible. And not only are they edible and nutritious, they also help control blood sugar. Again, in a different way than either the cinnamon or the slimy foods. But they found 3 grams of mulberry leaves, 1 gram with each meal, think of 3 meals a day. So 1 gram with breakfast, 1 gram with lunch, 1 gram with dinner. That after about a month works as good as metformin in controlling blood sugar. So that's pretty amazing. So with the mulberry, you get just a bunch of fruit and also edible leaves. Wow, that would definitely be my choice.
Amazing. And you mentioned the size. There's also this other variety called Pakistan mulberry, where
with the big, huge,
bigger, and the leaves are also huge. I did learn, and this brings me to my last question, I did learn that the leaves, you have to kind of cook them a certain way. I heard you mention in a medicinal herbs class that if you're going to want to extract or absorb as much of the nutrition from leaves, especially like a tea or teasing, how you say, you want to dehydrate leaves. Is there something that you can say about that?
Yeah, you misheard.
Okay, I wanted to know. Please.
Yeah, you do not want to dehydrate. You want to dry them, but you do not want to dehydrate them in a dehydrator.
No, not in a dehydrator. No, we're off-grid dry, like hang, right?
Yeah. So if you remember, plants have a cell wall. It's a hard, rigid structure that holds everything inside the cell inside and everything outside the cell outside. So if you just take a green leaf and drop it in hot water, you're not going to get any compounds out of it. All the good nutrients and vitamins and minerals and all that are going to be stuck inside the cell. But when plants die, when it realizes the circulation has stopped, they trigger an enzyme. It's the last thing they do. That enzyme starts chewing holes through the cell wall. And after about 2 weeks, there's all these holes through the cell wall. The water evaporates out. Once the water is gone, that enzyme stops chewing things up. And so you've basically made plant jerky. But now with all these holes in it, when you put it in the hot water or the alcohol or the vinegar, now you have all sorts of escape routes for the compounds in the cells to go out into your tea, into your vinegar, into your alcohol. If you're actually going to eat the leaf, you don't have to bother with that. You can just eat the leaf because you're swallowing the entire thing. Your digestive tract and your teeth will destroy the cell walls and release everything. But if your plan is to just make an infusion of some sort, if you're just trying to make a tea or a tincture or an oxymel or an oil, you want to dry the leaves naturally. Let them just hang dry for 2 weeks. If you put them in a dehydrator or your oven to force dry them, what happens is the water gets forced out of the stoma. There's little tiny holes, in the leaves themselves where the water will escape, but the cell walls will remain intact. So even then, when you put it in the water or the alcohol, you're not going to get anything out of the leaves. You want it to air dry so that enzyme can chew the holes through it. So then when you put it in the water or the alcohol, you have escape routes. So not dehydrating, air drying.
Correct. Okay, so I meant don't use it fresh.
Right.
So is there a danger or to using, like if you pick it fresh, like if you pick like a berry leaf or a mint leaf, is it like in any way not beneficial? Is
Okay.
it just not as potent?
So it really depends. It's a plant by plant basis. Some of the plants are best picked young. Some of the plants are best picked towards the end of the life cycle. There are some that are basically they have to die in the ground before you harvest them if you want the medicinal properties. So that there's no rule of thumb. That is a plant by plant technique requirement.
And is that something that when we're looking through your book,
it will be on there.
What would it be under? Just like how you cook it?
Yeah. So actually, so each book or each thing also has when to harvest it, and how to harvest and how to prepare, and so it'll be in that stage or in that part.
Okay, great. So like how was an example here? So this is. Well, thank you so very much, Mark, for your generous visit here. And for anyone that's tuning in right now, a little bit here at the end of our broadcast, the way that I started the broadcast was by sharing that we actually, apart from the Bible, this is one of Jason's favorite books that we carry in our van. And then we ordered Mark's new book that he has. Ours is supposed to arrive today. So we're excited to dig in. But if you're in a situation where you are stranded, it's our thought, right? You're stranded and you need to know what kind of survival things you can and cannot do or should not do, right? This is a great thing to have, not just in your home library, but I believe in your vehicle that you travel with so that you are prepared. And obviously if you have it in your vehicle and you're not the driver, you're the passenger, you can be learning about these wonderful treasures that you can find in creation and discover all the different things that are all around us that we didn't even plant, and they're here. And that was one of the most beautiful things that we discovered when we moved to our property, our land 10 years ago, was that we had all these wild edible berries that we didn't do anything. We've struggled so much to grow food in Texas, but there are certain things that we don't have to do anything. When we have this one huge amaranth tree that the seeds flew from the garden and we don't water it or anything, and it's the best amaranth tree that we have. So there's so much resilience and so many gifts in nature, and so we appreciate this opportunity to have this conversation here. But again, someone just joined us at the end. Go back and watch the replay, and we invite you to check out all the links that we provided so that you can get Mark's resources, support the website. Mark, do you have any ongoing ways that people can support other than going to your classes? Do you have any?
So the way I keep the house is from my company Medicine Man Planco. So going back to both my herbal knowledge and my scientific knowledge, my products from Medicine Man Planco, they're ancient plants scientifically supported for modern issues. So I have, the brain pill that helps with cognition and memory, recall, the liver pill that helps strengthen and maintain the liver, the blood pressure pill, the blood sugar pill, the serenity pill. There's the uric acid pill, the stonebreaker pill. a bunch of others. I'm actually losing track of how many I have out right now. Yeah, so medicinemanplanco.com. These are a premium product, only the best stuff. They're in glass bottles, so there's no risk of leaching any toxic chemicals or bispholates or phthalates into the compounds. And everything in the formulation is all natural. So in a couple of cases, like I needed a preservative. The preservative I found is actually an extract from rosemary. Another one required a processing aid where most of the supplements will use a magnesium stearate, a synthetic greasy salt. I found a rice bran that gives the same properties. So there's basically nothing in my formulas that we weren't already eating 40,000 years ago. But with the scientific proof, they're dosed for the average adult of 165 pounds. If you're 50 pounds more, add an extra pill. If you're 50 pounds less, take less. A lot of herbal supplements out there use a shotgun approach where they'll have 10 milligrams of this and 10 milligrams of that. I usually go with 3 to 4 different plants in high enough dosage. Usually it's around 600 to 800 milligrams of the particular plant to truly get that mechanism active in your body that the plant is supposed to do. And then I also have the Foraging bandana. If you spend any time out in the woods, bandanas are just a key thing. If you're familiar with the TV show Alone, one of the contestants, Dr. Nicole Eppellian, she's another excellent edible and medicinal plant person. She and I worked together to create a bandana with what we consider the 12 most useful, important wild plants a person should know. I also have classes on both the Medicine Man website and Foraging Texas. There's a list of upcoming classes I'm teaching all over right now. Not all of them are up there, but I'm booked up through March of 2023 with classes already scheduled. I have ancestral health tips. A lot of our health problems are because we've made the modern world so different than the world we evolved in that we are not doing a lot of the activities that our caveman ancestors did that help maintain their health. And so in that part, I give a lot of different tips on simple things, walking around barefoot on uneven ground, throwing things at stuff, taking cold showers, that sort of thing. The lifestyle changes that hopefully will mean you don't need these products because you'll bring back that ancestral health that we had that allowed us to conquer the world.
I love that you said that because I actually only have a handful of products that I recommend to people, but I've kind of pulled up this because normally like an immune support, if you catch yourself, then you have some opportunistic virus or something or sickness, illness because you were stressed, having something like an immune boosting thing is something I would recommend having in someone's kind of medicine cabinet for emergencies. Is there anything else that you would recommend? Because normally I recommend people if you can't make it yourself quickly, something for immune health, something for like probiotics is what I get excited about.
So in the probiotic, I have the gut pill. It's live Lactobacillus acidophilus, so one of the bacteria that's supposed to be in our body. Then it has Triphalia fruit, which has been shown to support the good bacteria and suppress the bad bacteria. It also has, I'm forgetting now, the marshmallow root, which helps repair the mucosal membrane protective layer of digestive tract, and calendula flower, which has been shown to repair the underlying tissue. So if the mucosal membrane gets damaged, then the bacteria and the digestive juices and the acid can start chewing away at the underlying tissue. So you have the marshmallow root and the calendula to help maintain and support the digestive tract, and the acidophilus and the lactobacillus acidophilus and the Triphalia fruit to raise the good bacteria and suppress the bad bacteria. So you're taking care of everything there. Another really key one, especially in modern life, is the liver pill, because we are all doing terrible things to our liver. Basically, if more than, say, 2 machines touch your food, you're probably causing liver damage. So, and I consider a knife to be a machine. So just something to keep in mind. But a basic rule of thumb I try and do is, the fewer machines touching your food, the better.
Mhm.
Go natural. So the liver pill, it helps support and maintain and protect the liver from all the terrible things we're doing to it in the modern life.
And I see that you have a subscribe and save. Do you
Yes.
also have you ever had people contact you for like a case? Do they like? I see an option for that. Can
Yeah.
they contact you if they
Multiple
want to?
times every day. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So if you have a
That would. I would
particular
just.
question, yeah.
Yeah. So I would just recommend for people if you find something that you like, try to have ongoing as you build up your ability to grow your own things and that type of things. If something
Yep.
works really well to keep you resilient and strong, then and you find that you like one of these that Mark has mentioned, like maybe contact him to get a case or something, so that you know that you and your family are
I'm
going to
stocked
be
up on it.
well taken care of when
Yep.
things get
And we will cut you a
hairy.
deal on that. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so
Also,
much.
let me say you should sign up for the Medicine Man Planco newsletter, where I go into at the bottom of the homepage. There's a place to do that, and I'll talk about different plants that you can grow or kitchen culinary herbs, the medicinal properties of that. I'll go into detail about the science behind my products, their coupon codes, the list of upcoming classes, all that sort of stuff. So I'm here for you, is what it
Well,
boils
thank you
down
so
to.
much. Let
I'm
me
trying
ask
to.
you something. With all the different classes that you've had the opportunity to teach, what is your favorite class that you see people go from not knowing very much to just being so empowered and so confident? I know that you've got
Mhm.
several styles of classes, but as
Yeah.
they consider where they might start, you have some really like
Uh,
hands-on classes coming up.
Yeah. So if you look on the upcoming classes, it will be things like a plant walkabout, where that is just 4 hours walking around, harvesting the plants. And then I'll go through, explaining the structural features, how it's used, edible, medicinal, and just kind of get you over that initial hump and teach you a
Mhm.
bunch of plants that you will then be able to recognize later on and use in your diet. The most popular classes, though, and it's also the most stressful and hardest for me, but also one that it's just absolutely fantastic. While I'm doing it, I am just so pumped up. But that is an all day event where we start in the morning, we spend about 4 hours foraging, and then we take the stuff back and we cook it into a food, and then we eat it. And so those are usually at the Cato Mounds historic site. Is the next one. And so in the fall, I think it's October, maybe October 10th, somewhere in October, maybe October 8th. But we will be out. We will forage the ingredients for we're going to make lasagna in a Dutch oven. We're going to make the pasta from scratch. We're going to make the two different types of cheeses from scratch. We're going to gather the seasonings from the wild. I'm probably going to bring some venison sausage or something like that along. We'll have a vegan one and a meat one. And it's just an all day. There'll be homemade mead or beer usually too. But it's just it's a huge all day hands on cooking extravaganza, food extravaganza that people just go crazy over. So
I love that. Well,
then,
thank you. I invite everyone to go check it out. Go ahead.
oh, I also do like cooking classes where I'll do the foraging beforehand, but then teach you how to make the pastas, the cheeses, the candy, different things like that. To one of the goals is to, well, with wild edibles, people have this weird thought that they have to cook it in this precise way or else everyone will die. And that's not the case. In most cases, it's use it as a spinach substitute, use it as cabbage, use it as Italian seasoning. And so I've been doing the walkabouts, but people say, well, I know you say that, but could you show us? And so I've started up a series of cooking classes at different places, like here in Houston at the Houston Botanic Garden, up in Bernie, the Cibolo Center for Conservation. Hopefully next spring, I'll be starting them up at Wimberley at Spoke Hollow Outfitters. There's a number of places where you can learn to actually make these foods that I'm talking about. Pickle it, make it pasta, make it cheese, make it candy, those sort of things.
Fantastic. I have Just noticing I have a couple of inchworms enjoying the live stream as well. So, well, thank you
Not edible.
again. What's that? Not edible. Not planning on making it my afternoon snack. So I hope that as you watch the this beautiful class that Mark brought to us, that you will consider having those top 3 books that he mentioned. So two are the ones that he wrote, and the other one was Botany. Is it Botany
In a
Today?
day.
Did I remember?
Botany in a day.
In a day.
In a
So
day.
and that you can find the link on his website. So those are 3 books that you can add to your library. And I would, like I mentioned, I would suggest getting an extra copy for your vehicle that you can have. And anywhere in North America, you can use the foraging guide. And also consider checking out Mark's website for any supplements that you're looking for. And also that bandana is something on my list that I will be ordering today.
Oh, thank you.
And so, it's really important to invest and be intentional in the kind of future that you want to have. And it starts today, right now. You can order the 3 books. If you're interested in having something easy to take with you, the bandana is a great resource. And also, the Foraging Texas website, share it with your family, your friends, so that they can start learning too, and spread the word, and consider going to one of the live experiences with Mark. He has so many different experiences. He's
Yeah.
hosted by libraries. He does the
The science
hands-on.
museums. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
so many ways that you can go deeper in your understanding. And like he mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, the reason that he got interested in this is because it was handed down to him. So if you learn, then you can have the seed to hand it down to the generations of people that are around you. And it's a good investment in your future and for generations to come. So thank you again, Mark, for this beautiful contribution to all of us that watched. And any final things that you want to say, any final words of wisdom from all of your beautiful experience?
I just popped over to the comments and I see Aaron Mitchum is here. Hey, Aaron, I missed the donut shop too, but it just got too much. But as far as thoughts, the best thing you can do to improve your health, the easiest thing you can do, get outside, go wild, get healthy, get outside, be in the sun, walk around, bend, stretch, hang from a tree branch, pick things up and throw them at other things. Just become a kid in the woods again. It's amazing for your health.
I agree. Well, thank you so very much. I hope that you will all be inspired today. You can just take your shoes off right now and start earthing. Go outside.
I'm barefoot right now, actually. So.
I normally broadcast barefoot, but we're trying to train our livestock guardian dog right now. So I decided I better put on my work boots in case we had to do a quick run. So, but it's so easy to be. It's really God's already provided everything. The sun will make you healthier. Breathing fresh air will make you healthier. Being outside and barefoot and just touching the dirt and observing, like you have to stop. To actually just neurologically, you have so many things that you can benefit from. And now, once you incorporate some of the things that Mark mentioned today, then you will understand better what you're looking at and how you can have greater benefits from edible wild plants, and how you can benefit also for your health. And I know one thing that's going to change in my life is probably my house will become like, we live tiny, but it'll become like yours. I'll have things hanging everywhere because I've been actually doing the teas. Most of everything I was doing fresh. Now I have to learn which ones I need to hang and dry. So thanks again. And if y'all have any questions, please visit the links below. Contact Mark. He is so generous, and he just wants to direct you to what resources you need to grow in this life mission of helping people understand plants better, right?
Yep. Feeding the people the way we were intended to be fed.
Amen. Well, y'all be blessed. May the Lord bless you and keep you, shine his face toward you, be gracious unto you, turn his countenance toward you, and give you shalom peace. Bye, y'all.
Amen. Bye, everyone.